Denise Okafor-Wells was 34 years old when her husband of 15 years finally admitted there was someone else. Roland sat across from her, looking almost relieved to finally say it out loud. He said it wasn't serious. He said she'd been too busy, too distant, too consumed by the business she'd built from a single folding table into 6 figures a year. He refused to say her name. Denise told him she needed air. She walked out to her car, calm, composed, the same face she wore when a wedding order went wrong. But she didn't drive home. She followed his taillights instead, 3 car lengths back, all the way to a driveway she knew better than her own. A driveway that belonged to the woman who'd sat at her table every holiday for 15 years. Her best friend. Through the window, there was no mistaking what she saw. Roland had no idea he'd just handed his wife the first piece of evidence. And in that moment, sitting in the dark outside Tasha's house, Denise made a decision that would change everything. Before we dive in, comment where you're watching from today. And if stories like this speak to you, hit subscribe, because tomorrow's story is even more intense. The kitchen smelled like brown butter and vanilla at 5 in the morning. Denise moved through the space the way she always did, sure-footed, precise, her hands doing one thing while her eyes checked another. 40 petits fours left on the cooling rack. The pale gold ribbon on the cake boxes needed retying. The handwritten name cards for the Whitmore wedding were lined up on the steel prep table, each one angled just so. She fixed the one that wasn't. That was Denise. She fixed things. She always had. Her catering company, Okafor Table, had started 6 years ago in her mother's old church kitchen on a folding table with a borrowed mixer. Now it occupied a proper commercial space in Midtown. Stainless steel countertops, a walk-in cold room, 2 full-time staff, and 4 part-timers. The Whitmore wedding was the 3rd high-profile booking this month. She had a waiting list going into next spring. She should have been proud. Most days she was. But at 5 in the morning, checking her phone for a text that still hadn't come, pride was hard to find. She set the phone face down on the prep table and went back to the petits fours. Roland had said he'd text when he got in from his meeting. That was last night. The meeting had been in the city, barely 20 minutes from their house, and yet the text never came, and the phone had gone straight to voicemail when she'd tried at 11. She hadn't tried again. She'd learned not to push. That was something she'd learned slowly over the last couple of years. How much space Roland needed. How quickly a simple question could become a whole thing. She told herself she understood. He was under pressure. His development firm had stalled on 2 projects this year, and he carried that stress the way some men carry weight, tight in the jaw, short in conversation, quick to interpret concern as criticism. She gave him room. She always gave him room. It was just that lately the room had gotten very large. She picked up a petit four and checked the glaze for air bubbles. Found one. Smoothed it over with the tip of a warm offset spatula, gentle as a correction whispered instead of shouted. Her phone buzzed on the table. She reached for it fast. Tasha, not Roland. "Girl, I saw your post from the Kendall event last month. That dessert table looked insane. You're too good at this." Denise smiled in spite of herself. She typed back, "Still feel like I'm winging it half the time." That was the thing about Tasha Greer. She knew exactly what to say. She'd always known. 15 years of friendship, and Tasha still showed up to family dinners with a bottle of wine and a genuine interest in everyone at the table. She remembered Bishop's bad knee. She remembered Roland's coffee order. She sent voice notes on hard days, long ones, the kind that felt like sitting in the same room. After the second round of fertility treatment failed, the one that had gutted Denise in a way she hadn't fully let herself feel yet, Tasha had come over with soup she'd made herself, real soup, from scratch. "You don't have to talk," Tasha had said, sitting cross-legged on Denise's couch. "I'll just be here." That was worth everything. By 6:30, the boxes were sealed and stacked. Denise pulled off her apron and sat at the small desk in the corner of the kitchen, the one she used for invoices and vendor calls. She opened her email. Near the top was a name she hadn't seen in a while. Julian Reyes. The subject line said, "Quick question, business matter, no rush." She remembered Julian from Howard. Sharp, even then. Funny, in a quiet way. He'd gone to law school after graduation, and she'd seen his name surface a few times over the years in real estate circles. A well-regarded attorney now, by all accounts. They had stayed loosely in touch the way college friends sometimes do. A comment here, a congratulations there. She skimmed the email. He'd heard through a mutual contact that she ran a catering company, and he had a client, a hotel group, looking for exclusive catering partnerships. He thought the fit might be worth a conversation. Nothing formal, just an introduction if she was interested. Denise read it twice, then flagged it to answer later. Not because she was hesitant, because 40 petty fours were waiting for a delivery van, and the Whitmore wedding didn't care about her inbox. She was good at later. She'd been doing later for years. She made it home by 4 o'clock. Roland had texted at noon. Brief, no punctuation, the kind of message that communicated just enough to avoid a question. Something came up. Work trip. Leaving tonight. Back Thursday. She'd stared at it for a long moment in the delivery van. Then she went ahead and picked up the groceries she'd planned for dinner. Salmon, asparagus, the good olive oil. She didn't know why. Force of habit, maybe. Or the hope that he'd surprise her. He didn't. At 6:15, a second text arrived from Tasha. "Crazy week over here too, babe. Rain check on Sunday?" Denise set the phone on the dinner table, the table she had set for 2. Cloth napkins folded into neat triangles, candles she hadn't lit. She looked at the empty chair across from her, and for the first time, quietly, like a door opening just a crack, she wondered if the 2 cancellations were a coincidence. He came home at 11:17. Denise heard the garage door before she heard his key. She was sitting on the couch with a glass of water she hadn't drunk, still in her work clothes, the television on but muted. She'd been watching the closed captions scroll across the screen without reading a single word. She heard his footsteps in the hallway, the careful, soft kind, the kind you use when you know you should have been home hours ago. Roland appeared in the doorway. He looked tired. More than that, he looked like a man who had been rehearsing something. "Hey," he said. "Hey," she said back. He didn't move toward her right away. He stood there with his jacket still on, hands loose at his sides, and she could see him working up to it. His jaw moved slightly, like he was chewing the first word before he let it out. "Can you sit down?" he said. "I am sitting down." He looked at the couch, noticed she was right, and almost smiled. Almost. "I mean, can we talk? For real?" Denise set her water glass on the coffee table, folded her hands in her lap. "Okay," she said. He sat across from her in the armchair, not beside her, she noticed that. He took his jacket off, draped it over the arm of the chair, took a breath. "I need to tell you something," he said, "and I need you to just let me get it out." She waited. "There's been someone." He said it fast, like ripping off a bandage. "Someone else. It's not serious, Denise. I want you to know that first. It's not serious." The room didn't change. The muted television kept scrolling its silent words. The lamp in the corner threw the same warm light it always did. Denise looked at her husband and felt something inside her go completely, perfectly still. "Okay," she said. Roland blinked. He'd expected something else. She could see it on his face, the flinch he'd been bracing for, the voice rising, the tears. When none of it came, he shifted forward in the chair, elbows on knees. I know, he said. But things have been hard. You know they have. You've been so focused on the business, and I get it, I do. But after everything with the treatments, it felt like you just checked out, like I wasn't even there." "When did it start?" she asked. The question was quiet, direct, no edge on it at all. He paused. "A while back." "How long is a while?" "Denise, I'm asking a simple question, Roland." He rubbed the back of his neck. "A few months, Maybe a little more. It happened. I wasn't out looking for it. Things were hard at work, you were going through your thing, and I felt invisible in my own house. Your thing. 2 rounds of injections, 2 losses that the doctors called clinical, but that had lived in her body like something heavier than language, and he'd just called it her thing. She breathed in, breathed out. "Who is she?" Denise asked. "That doesn't matter right now." "I think it does." She's not important. That's what I'm trying to tell you." He leaned forward further, voice softening, shifting into the register she recognized as his persuasion voice. "What I'm saying is, I don't want to lose this. I don't want to lose you. I made a mistake, and I'm sitting here telling you, and that has to count for something." Denise looked at him for a long moment. She thought about the dinner table last night, the cloth napkins, the candles she never lit. She thought about 11 missed texts and a voicemail that never got a call back, and the way he'd stopped touching her shoulder when he walked past, somewhere in the last year, without her ever being able to name the exact day it stopped. "It counts," she said. Roland exhaled, his shoulders dropped. He looked, genuinely, like a man who believed the hard part was behind him. "I need some air," she said. She stood, picked up her keys from the side table. "I'm going to take a drive. I'll be back." "Denise, I'm not leaving. I just need a minute outside." She said it evenly. No tremor in it. "Get some water. I'll be back soon." She walked out through the garage. She sat in her car in the dark for 2 minutes, maybe 3. Then, through the small rectangle of glass in the garage door, she saw the light inside the house move. Roland was in the kitchen. Then he wasn't. Then the garage door beside hers began to rise. She sank lower in her seat. His car backed out. He hadn't turned toward the neighborhood loop. He was heading toward the main road, moving with the kind of purpose that didn't look like a man who needed to clear his head. It looked like a man with somewhere to be. Denise started her engine. She gave him half a block. Then she pulled out of the driveway, kept her headlights low, and followed his taillights into the dark. She already knew. Not the way you know when someone tells you, the way you know when your body figures it out before your brain will let itself. Her hands were steady on the wheel. That surprised her. Her heart was hitting fast and hard against her ribs, but her hands just rested there, 10 and 2, calm as a Sunday drive. She kept 2 car lengths between them. Roland drove like a man with nothing to worry about. No checking the mirrors, no hesitation at intersections. He drove like he was heading home. She turned when he turned, and then she knew exactly where they were going. Westbrook Terrace. She'd driven this street maybe 100 times. She'd brought casseroles down this block, birthday cakes, a bottle of wine, and a gift bag with a card she'd handwritten. She knew every house on this street. She knew the one with the wind chimes. She knew the one with the broken mailbox that had been broken for 3 years. She knew the yellow porch light on the corner. She knew the gray-blue ranch house with the flower boxes her best friend planted every spring. Roland's brake lights flared once. Then he turned into the driveway. Not onto the curb, not slowing down to check the address. Into the driveway, all the way to the garage door, which opened for him before he even stopped the car completely. He had the code. Of course he had the code. He pulled in. The garage door came down behind him. Denise kept driving. She went another 100 yards, past the yellow porch light, past the house with the wind chimes, and she parked against the curb under a tree that blocked most of the street light. She turned off her engine. She sat there for a moment with her hands still on the wheel. Then she got out. The night was warm, crickets going somewhere in the grass. The street was quiet and still, the kind of quiet that only lives in neighborhoods where everybody thinks they're safe. She walked along the sidewalk with her arms at her sides. No rushing, no stumbling. Her heels were barely louder than her breathing. She stopped at the edge of Tasha's front yard. The living room light was on. The curtains were the sheer kind, cream-colored, the kind that looked pretty but didn't do much. Denise stood in the shadow of the big oak tree near the property line and looked through the window. They were in the kitchen, which opened into the living room. Roland was leaning against the counter with his jacket gone, sleeves pushed to his elbows, holding a glass like he lived there. Tasha was at the stove. She turned to say something, and Roland laughed. Head back, easy, the laugh of a man with no tension in him at all. Tasha laughed too. She reached over and touched his arm when she did it. Not a touch that asked permission, a touch that assumed it was welcome, a touch that had a history. Denise stood very still. She catalogued it. The laughing, the touching. The way Tasha moved around him, handing him something, brushing past his shoulder, and the way he leaned toward her slightly when she did. Just slightly, just enough. The way you lean toward someone you've been leaning toward for a long time. This was not a first encounter. This was not a mistake that just happened. This had furniture in it. This had a garage code. This had two people who were comfortable and warm and unguarded in each other's company. And that kind of comfort doesn't come cheap. It costs time. It costs all the quiet moments you steal from somewhere else. Denise thought about all the nights Tasha had sat at her dinner table. She thought about Tasha's arms around her when the second round of treatment failed. The way she'd held Denise's face in both hands and said, "You're going to be okay. I promise you're going to be okay." She thought about Roland at that same table, refilling Tasha's wine glass before he refilled her own. She looked through the window one more time. Then she turned around and walked back to her car. She didn't storm the door. She didn't call anyone. She got in, closed the door softly, and sat in the dark under the tree. Her eyes were dry. She pulled out her phone, opened the Notes app, and she began to type. Thursday, 11:52 p.m. Roland pulled into Tasha's garage, had the code, did not knock. She stopped, read it back, added one more line. Has been here before, many times. She looked at the words on the screen for a long moment. Then she locked her phone, started the car, and pulled away from the curb without looking back at the house. She drove home. The streets were empty, and the traffic lights all blinked yellow this late, and she moved through them one by one, steady and quiet. By the time she pulled into her own garage, something had settled inside her. Not peace, exactly. More like a decision that had made itself while she wasn't looking. She was not going to knock on Tasha's door in the dark. She was not going to scream at Roland when he got home. She was going to find out everything. Every date, every dollar, every lie stacked on top of every other lie, all the way down to the bottom. And then she was going to decide exactly how this ended. Denise called Imani at 6:45 in the morning. Not a text, a call. Imani picked up on the second ring, which meant she was already awake, already moving. That was one thing about Imani. She ran on the same schedule Denise did. Up before the sun, coffee made before most people had opened their eyes. "You okay?" Imani said first thing. "I need you to come to the office before we open," Denise said, "before anybody else gets there." A pause, short but loaded. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, Imani said. The catering office was attached to the commercial kitchen on Halcyon Street, a clean, narrow building with stainless steel everything and the permanent smell of good food baked into the walls. Denise had signed the lease on this space 6 years ago with her own savings and a loan she'd paid back in 31 months. Every piece of equipment in this kitchen had her fingerprints on it. The mixers, the proofing racks, the reach-in coolers humming along the back wall. She loved this place the way you love something you built from nothing. She was sitting at the small desk in the office alcove with 2 coffees already poured when Imani came through the side door, still pulling on her jacket. Imani Ross was 33 years old and looked like someone you did not want to argue with. Sharp eyes, close-cut natural hair, the kind of face that didn't hide what it was thinking. She was Denise's cousin by blood and her business partner by choice, and those were 2 different kinds of trust that happened to live in the same person. She took one look at Denise and sat down. "Tell me," she said. So Denise told her. All of it. Roland's confession, following his car, Tasha's driveway, the garage code, The laughing in the kitchen, the easy touching, the comfort of two people with nothing left to hide from each other. She told it flat, without flinching, the same way she'd typed it into her notes app at midnight. Just the facts, in order. Imani sat very still through the whole thing. Her coffee cup stayed untouched. When Denise finished, Imani said nothing for a moment. Then, Tasha. Yes, Denise said. Tasha. Yes. Imani set her jaw. Her nostrils flared once, and then she pulled it back, the way she always did when she was choosing words over reaction. Okay, she said quietly. Okay. What do you need from me? I need you to help me go through the finances, Denise said. All of it. Business and household, both. Before I make any move, before I say one word to either of them, I need to know exactly where we stand, what he can touch, what he might have already touched. Imani nodded slowly. You think he's been moving money? I think I don't know, Denise said, and I need to know. They started that same morning, after the prep crew clocked in and the kitchen filled with noise. Denise and Imani sat side by side in the alcove behind a closed door with two laptops open, 3 years of statements printed from the joint household account, and the business's financial records pulled up through their bookkeeping software. It took 2 days to find the first thread. It was Imani who spotted it. A recurring transfer, 60 days apart, out of the joint household account they shared. Not a huge number each time, 400, sometimes 600, once 900. The kind of amount that doesn't scream, the kind that hides in the middle of a statement between a car payment and a grocery bill. The transfers were labeled OGP Holdings. Denise typed the name into a search. What came back was a single-member LLC registered in Tasha's county. Property management. The registered agent was Tasha's name. Her mouth went dry. Keep going, Imani said. They kept going. The line of credit was worse. Roland had co-signed on it 2 years ago when Denise expanded operations. It had been his idea, actually. A good faith gesture, he'd called it. I want to be part of what you're building. She had let him because she thought that's what a marriage was, building things together. What they found, buried in the drawdown history, were 2 withdrawals Denise hadn't authorized. Small enough that they hadn't tripped any alerts, just over $3,000 combined. Both of them on dates that matched fund transfers into OGP Holdings. Denise sat back in her chair. She stared at the screen and didn't speak for a long moment. Roland had used the co-sign access on her business line of credit to funnel money to Tasha. Not just his own money, hers. The business she had built, the loan she had managed with precision for 2 years. He had reached into it, quietly, like it was nothing. Imani closed her laptop. She turned to face Denise straight on, and her voice was low and very clear. This isn't just heartbreak, she said. What he did to these accounts, that's theft, Denise. We need someone who can help us protect this business, and we need them now. Bishop Okafor lived 20 minutes from Denise in a small brick house on Aldermore Drive that smelled like cedar and coffee and the same brand of dish soap he'd been buying since Denise was 7 years old. The front porch light was always on after dark. Always. She didn't know if he did it on purpose or if it was just habit, but every time she pulled into his driveway at night, that light felt like something. She sat in the car for a moment before going in. Then she got out. Her father answered the door before she could knock. He'd probably heard her tires on the gravel. Bishop Okafor was 62 years old, built like someone who had spent 4 decades doing real work with his hands. Wide shoulders, a thick gray beard, slow-moving in a way that had nothing to do with age and everything to do with a man who didn't rush. He looked at her face and stepped back from the door without a word. That was Bishop. He made room first, asked questions second. The kitchen table was where everything happened in this house. It was where Denise had done homework as a girl, where her father had paid bills on Sunday mornings, where he'd told her, quietly and without drama, that her mother wasn't coming back. The table was old oak, nicked along one edge from the time a contractor friend of Bishop's had set down a tool belt without looking. It had never been replaced. He poured 2 cups of coffee and sat across from her. Talk, he said. So she did. This time it came out differently than it had with Amani. With Amani, she had delivered the facts. Clean, ordered, efficient. This time, sitting across from her father, the feelings came with it. Not crying, she wasn't ready to cry yet, or maybe she was past it, but the weight of it. 15 years of a friendship, 9 years of a marriage, the money, the business line of credit, Tasha's name on that LLC, filed and registered, waiting to receive what Roland had been quietly sending her. Bishop listened to all of it. He didn't interrupt. He held his coffee cup in both hands and watched her face, and listened the way he had always listened. Like whatever she was saying was the only thing happening in the world right now. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I knew something was off about Tasha." Denise looked up. "Not this," he said, shaking his head slowly. "I didn't know it was this, but something. The way she talked about your business sometimes. Little jokes that weren't really jokes. Comments about Roland that she'd walk back too fast, like she knew she'd said too much. I noticed it." "Why didn't you say anything?" Denise asked. Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. He set his cup down. His hands were flat on the table now. "Because you seemed happy," he said, "and I didn't want to be the one to put doubt in your head if I was wrong. I told myself it wasn't my place." He paused. "That was a mistake on my part. I should have said something." Denise stared at the table, the familiar nick in the oak edge. "I had doubts too," she said. "I had moments, small things that didn't sit right. But I always talked myself out of it because I didn't want to be the person who made everything complicated." "You made yourself smaller to keep the peace," Bishop said. It wasn't a question. She didn't answer because he was right, and they both knew it. "Denise," he waited until she met his eyes, "you spent how many years making sure everyone around you was comfortable? Roland, Tasha. You absorbed things that should have made you ask harder questions, because asking hard questions felt like causing trouble." He leaned forward slightly. "Look where that got you." It landed simply, no anger in it, just truth. "I'm not saying this to make you feel worse," he said. "I'm saying it because you are the smartest, most capable woman I know, and I need you to stop protecting everyone else's comfort and start protecting yourself. Nobody else in this situation is worried about yours." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded once. 3 days later, Denise sat across from Julian Reyes in a quiet corner booth at a restaurant near his office downtown. Julian was 36, with an easy posture and steady eyes, and the kind of calm that came from actual confidence rather than performance. He was a real estate attorney now. She'd known him casually back in college, the kind of person you stayed loosely in touch with over the years through mutual friends and occasional check-ins. He'd reached out a few weeks ago about reviewing a vendor contract that had some zoning language she hadn't liked. That had been before everything. Now she had a different reason for being here. They talked through the original contract matter first. Julian walked her through the zoning issue in plain language, no unnecessary complexity, pausing when he wanted to make sure she followed his reasoning, rather than assuming she would just take his word for it. It struck her, quietly, almost sideways, how different that felt, being treated as someone whose understanding mattered. "There's something else I'd like your help with," Denise said. She walked him through what she and Amani had found, the transfers, the LLC, the withdrawals on the business line of credit. She didn't perform calm this time. She just was calm, because she was past the shock now and into the work. Julian listened without interrupting. When she finished, he asked 3 precise questions about the co-sign terms, the withdrawal dates, and whether Roland had signatory rights clearly documented. She had answers to all 3. She had brought the documents. He looked through them for several minutes without speaking. Then he looked up. "I'd like to help you with this," he said. "Whatever you decide to do. About the marriage, about him. Your business does not have to go down with it." He slid the documents back across the table toward her. "Let's make sure it doesn't." Julian had set up a working space in Denise's catering office, a small conference room she used for client consultations, with a long table and good light. He came in 2 days after their restaurant meeting, a leather bag over one shoulder, and spread Roland's financial records across the table, the same way she spread sheet plans before an event. Precise, organized. Imani sat at the far end of the table with her own laptop, a yellow legal pad, and a pen she kept clicking without realizing it. Denise stood at the whiteboard she normally used for staffing schedules and wrote down 2 dates. The date Roland admitted the affair, the date she'd followed him to Tasha's driveway. "I need to know when the transfers started," she said without turning around. "Not just that they happened. When?" Julian nodded and got to work. It took him about an hour. He worked quietly, moving through statements, flagging pages, cross-referencing dates with a method that was steady and unhurried. Denise stayed busy. She went through vendor invoices. She answered 2 emails from a corporate client. She drank half a cup of coffee that went cold before she remembered it. She was not someone who could sit and wait. So she worked. Imani, who understood this about her, said nothing. At the end of the hour, Julian set his pen down flat on the table. "Denise." She turned. His face was composed, but careful. The face of someone about to hand over something that needed to be held carefully. "The first transfer hit Tasha's LLC account here." He turned a bank statement toward her and pointed to a date near the top. "This one, 14 months ago." Denise looked at the date. She read it twice. The room didn't spin. Nothing dramatic happened. But something in her chest went very still, the way a house goes quiet right before weather hits. 14 months ago was when she'd been in her second round of fertility treatment. The worst round. The one where the doctor had sat across from her in a paper-gowned room and used words like unexplained and options going forward and give it time. The round that had taken something out of her that she hadn't fully gotten back. The round where Roland had started sleeping at the edge of the bed, turned away. Where he'd stopped asking how her appointments went. Where he'd told her, not unkindly, that he needed her to stop putting so much pressure on everything. She heard Tasha's voice in her head, clear as a phone call. "You can't take it personally, Dee. Men shut down when they feel helpless. Give him some space. Don't smother him with expectations right now. He needs to feel like your partner, not your project." She had believed her. She had actually believed her. She had pulled back, stopped leaning on Roland during that period, tried to grieve quietly, alone, so he wouldn't feel burdened. And all the while, Tasha had been right there, close enough to step into the space Denise had just cleared. Not comfort, a strategy. Imani must have read something on her face, because she stopped clicking her pen. "Dee," she said quietly. Denise set the bank statement down. She put her hands flat on the table, the same way her father had done at his kitchen table 3 days ago, and she looked at the date one more time. The anger came then. Not the sharp, electric kind that makes you want to throw something. This was slower, heavier, the kind that settles into your bones and changes the temperature of everything. Because this wasn't just an affair. An affair she could have understood, the way you can understand something ugly without accepting it. This was Tasha sitting across from her in a coffee shop while Denise cried, and offering advice designed to widen the distance between Denise and the one person she'd been trying to hold on to. This was Tasha watching her grieve, offering a hand, and using it to push her further into the dark. That was the part that was different from everything else. She stayed quiet for a long moment, let it settle, did not let it move her into anything reckless. Then she looked up at Julian and Imani both. "Okay," she said. Her voice was level. "I'm done gathering." Imani exhaled, like she'd been holding air for 2 weeks. "We're ready to move?" she asked. "Yes." Julian studied her face, not checking if she was sure. She could tell he already knew she was. He was making sure she had everything she needed. "Then the next step is making sure there's nothing left for either of them to touch," she said. "I want everything in place before I'm in the same room with them." She looked at Julian directly. What can we file? What can we restructure? What do we lock down before I confront them? Julian reached into his bag and pulled out a clean legal pad. Let's go through it, he said. Roland started leaving his phone on the kitchen counter again. That was the first sign. A week after her session with Julian and Amani, Denise noticed it. The phone face up, no longer palmed the second it buzzed, no longer carried from room to room like something precious. He'd even left it on the bathroom vanity one morning while he showered. She glanced at the screen without touching it. A text from Tasha sat there unread, visible enough. She says hi. Denise set her toothbrush down, looked at herself in the mirror, and said nothing. He thought it was over. He thought her silence in the days since his confession meant she'd swallowed it, processed it, decided to keep the peace the way she always did. He thought he knew her. The dinner was Tasha's idea, technically. It happened on a Thursday evening at Denise and Roland's house. Just the three of them, supposedly casual, the kind of dinner Tasha had shown up for 100 times before. She'd brought wine, a good bottle, the kind she brought when she wanted to seem generous. She set it on the counter with both hands like an offering. I've been thinking about you, Tasha said, pulling Denise into a hug that lasted exactly the right amount of time. Warm, practiced. You seem better. I'm getting there, Denise said. She sounded like she meant it. She'd been practicing that, too. They ate pasta. They talked about Tasha's neighborhood, a new restaurant that had opened nearby, whether the summer had felt shorter than usual. Roland was relaxed in a way Denise hadn't seen in months, laughing easily, refilling glasses, leaning back in his chair like a man with nothing to worry about. Then Tasha set her fork down and tilted her head in that way she had, the one that said, I'm just thinking out loud. Dee, can I ask you something? About the business? Denise looked up. Sure. How's the growth looking? Because you mentioned maybe expanding. A second location, right? You were talking about it at Bishop's birthday. Still exploring it, Denise said. Nothing locked in yet. Tasha nodded slowly and then glanced at Roland, a glance so brief and practiced it would have meant nothing to anyone who wasn't watching for it. It's just, Tasha continued, swirling her wine. Roland and I were talking, not about anything serious, but about how an outside investment at the right time could really accelerate things for you. And since my property portfolio is in a position to... We should talk more seriously about that, Roland cut in, too quickly, the way he always did when he wanted something. Tasha's property is a real asset, Dee, a legitimate vehicle. If we move some of the business capital through there, structured it right, it's worth thinking about, Tasha said, her voice smooth and warm, like she was doing Denise a favor just by suggesting it. Denise let a small smile settle on her face. She picked up her wine glass, turned it once, and set it back down. I'll keep it in mind, she said. And that was all she said. Roland nodded, satisfied. Tasha looked equally pleased, already moving on to a story about a neighbor's renovation disaster. Denise finished her meal and cleared the plates, and laughed at the right moments, and nobody at that table knew that Julian had already filed the paperwork. 3 days earlier, he'd walked her through it, line by line, in the same conference room where he'd first shown her the date. The business credit line Roland had co-signed was restructured, his name removed, replaced by a formal amendment that Julian had prepared with the lender, one that required only Denise's signature as the sole primary owner of record. A new operating agreement was drawn up and executed. The LLC that housed the catering business had been quietly reorganized, Denise as the only named member, with Amani added as a limited partner to formalize what had always been true anyway. Every door Roland and Tasha planned to walk through was now a wall. Is there anything else they could use? Denise had asked, going through each page Julian set in front of her. Julian had looked at the documents, then at her. Not anymore, he said. She had signed the last page, capped the pen, and felt something she hadn't felt in months. Not relief, exactly. Something quieter, like a latch clicking shut. On a Sunday morning, 10 days after the dinner, Denise sat at her kitchen table with her laptop open and a fresh cup of coffee beside her. She typed 4 emails. The first went to Roland. She kept it short, kept it gentle. I've been thinking. I want us to try. A real conversation, all of us. Like family. Dinner here, Friday night. I'd like Tasha there too. I think it would help me. The second went to Tasha. Warm, almost loving. I miss you. Come Friday. It'll be good to have you at the table. The third went to Imani. 3 words. Friday. Be here. The fourth went to her father. Daddy, dinner Friday. I need you at this table. She read each one over, made no changes. Then she pressed send on all 4, closed the laptop, and finished her coffee. The table looked beautiful. Denise had said it herself that afternoon. White linen, the good plates, the tall candles she usually saved for holidays. She'd made roasted chicken, garlic potatoes, a salad with a lemon vinaigrette Roland used to ask for by name, the kind of meal that said, I still care. I'm still trying. That was the point. Roland had dressed up a little, not a suit, but a collared shirt, pressed. He'd even gotten a haircut. He was standing by the kitchen island when Tasha arrived, and the two of them exchanged exactly the kind of glance Denise expected. Quick, loaded, just a fraction too long. Then Tasha turned and wrapped both arms around Denise's neck like she'd done 1,000 times before. This looks amazing, Dee. She pulled back and looked around the dining room. You really did all this? You know I can't help myself, Denise said. Bishop arrived 10 minutes later. He hugged Denise without saying much, just held on for a second longer than usual, then went and sat at the far end of the table. Imani came in behind him, kissed Denise on the cheek, and took the chair beside Bishop. Neither of them said anything extra. They just settled in, the way people do when they already know what a room is for. Roland poured the wine. Tasha told a story about a contractor who'd botched her bathroom tile. Everybody laughed. The chicken was passed around. The candles threw warm light across the table. It looked from the outside like a family having dinner. Denise waited until the second helping. She let the conversation run its course, the easy small talk, the comfortable rhythm of forks and glasses. She watched Roland refill his wine. She watched Tasha tuck her hair behind her ear and laugh at something Bishop said. Then she set her fork down, not with a clatter, quietly, deliberately. She reached to the empty chair beside her and lifted the manila folder she'd placed there before anyone arrived. The table didn't go silent all at once. It went quiet, in pieces. Roland first, noticing the folder. Then Tasha, noticing Roland's face. Then the room. I want to talk about some things, Denise said. Her voice was even, almost gentle. I think we've waited long enough. Roland leaned back slightly. Dee, I'll be quick, she said. She opened the folder. Thursday, 3 weeks ago. She slid the first page across toward the center of the table, a printed bank statement with 2 lines highlighted in yellow. These transfers, they started 18 months ago, Roland. Not recently. 18 months. She tapped the date. That's 2 months into my second round of fertility treatment. The air in the room changed. That's also, she continued, moving to the next page, 3 weeks after Tasha told me I should give you space, that I was putting too much pressure on you. She looked at Tasha directly. You remember that conversation. We were in my car. You said I was smothering him. Tasha opened her mouth. Denise, that was genuine advice. I was worried about you both. The transfers went into an account tied to your property on Linwood. Denise's voice didn't change. She set another page down. This is the account number. This is the routing number from the joint account Roland co-signed. Julian Reyes, my attorney, pulled the full record. She paused. 18 months, Tasha. Tasha sat back. Her expression shifted. Something behind the warmth, something colder. But she recovered fast. There was an agreement. Roland offered to invest. That's not— There's no written investment agreement. Denise turned another page over. No contract, no loan terms, no documented return structure. It was a transfer, repeated, consistent, and undisclosed to me. Roland's jaw tightened. Denise, come on. This isn't— You're making it sound like something it isn't. 3 weeks ago, she said, turning to look at him squarely, you told me there was someone else. You wouldn't give me a name, so I followed your car. She let that land. I watched you pull into her driveway with a garage code. You didn't knock, Roland. You had a code. Nobody spoke. I sat outside and watched through the window. Her voice stayed flat, factual. There was nothing to misunderstand. Roland's hand moved to the table. What we had was going wrong long before. I know your argument, she said. I've heard it. And I want you to hear me clearly when I tell you that the reason our marriage felt distant is because my best friend was telling me to create that distance. She turned back to Tasha. On purpose, while you were already in my house. Tasha said nothing. For the first time all night, she had nothing to say. Bishop sat at the end of the table with his hands folded, watching. Imani hadn't moved. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. They were witnesses and they knew it, and so did everyone else. Denise turned back to the folder. She pulled out the final page and placed it in the center of the table. The last thing, she said. The business. She looked at Roland. You co-signed the credit line 4 years ago. You've used that connection twice in the last year without my knowledge. She slid the page forward. 3 weeks ago, I retained Julian to restructure the company. The amendment was filed and approved. She kept her eyes on Roland's face. Your name is off the credit line. Completely. Legally. It's already done. Roland stared at the page in the center of the table. He picked it up, put it back down, picked it up again. His eyes moved across the document the way a man reads something he desperately wants to misunderstand. This isn't— He stopped, swallowed. There has to be a process. You can't just— It's already filed, Denise said. Julian walked me through every step. Roland set the page down slowly. Then he turned to Tasha. It wasn't a look of anger, not right away. It was something more exposed than that. The look of a man who had just realized the floor was gone and was searching for something solid to grab onto. He turned to her the way a person turns to their parachute. Tasha was already sitting stiff in her chair. We'll be fine, Roland said to her. His voice had dropped, like he was trying to keep it between them. The Linwood property still has equity. We can— No. Tasha's word came out flat and fast. We can't. Roland blinked. What? The balloon payment on that property is due in 60 days, Roland. She said his name like it tasted sour. I told you that in February. I told you we needed another transfer to cover the gap, and you said— I said I'd handle it. His voice sharpened. I've been handling it. With her money. Tasha gestured toward Denise without looking at her. That was the whole point. That was always the whole point. If she's closed that off, then you have nothing liquid to bring to this. I have my own accounts. Tasha laughed, not warmly. It was a short, airless sound. Roland, I've seen your accounts. The table went very still. Roland's expression cracked. Something moved across his face that he couldn't quite hide. Shame dressed up as anger. What's that supposed to mean? It means exactly what it means. Tasha leaned forward. Her voice had dropped its warmth entirely now, all the softness gone, and what was underneath it was not pretty. You came to me talking about your portfolio, your developments, your trajectory. You let me believe you were positioned. You let me think this was a partnership. It is a partnership. You've been living off her credit for 2 years. She said it plainly, like a verdict. I didn't sign up to rebuild from scratch with a man who can't stand on his own without a co-signer. Roland pushed back from the table slightly. His voice got tight and controlled, in the way voices do right before they stop being controlled. You didn't sign up. He repeated it slowly, like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. You pursued this. You pushed for this. I pursued what I thought you were. Tasha's chin lifted. Not what you actually are. Oh, that's good. Roland's voice climbed now, past the controlled register. That is rich coming from you. You've been in her house for 15 years, eating her food and borrowing her goodwill, and now you want to stand up here and talk about what somebody actually is? Don't. Tasha pointed at him. Don't put this on me. You told me she wouldn't notice. You told me the credit line had room. You walked me through every single step of this, and now you're sitting here acting like I dragged you into something you wanted out of your marriage. I didn't manufacture that. No, you just made sure it stayed convenient for you. Denise did not move. She sat at the head of her own table, hands folded in her lap, and she watched the two of them pull each other apart. There was nothing left for her to say. She had said everything that needed to be said, and now she was watching the remainder take care of itself. Roland was shaking his head, his pressed collar shirt looking somehow wrinkled now, even though it wasn't. Tasha's careful warmth had been stripped all the way off, and the thing underneath it was not someone Denise recognized, though she suspected it had always been there. She had spent 15 years not seeing it. She saw it now. Bishop unfolded his hands. He stood up slowly, the way big men do, unhurried, deliberate, taking up all the space he needed. He looked at Roland first, then at Tasha. I think, he said quietly, it's time for both of you to leave my daughter's house. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Bishop's voice carried the kind of weight that doesn't come from volume. Roland opened his mouth. Bishop just looked at him, and Roland closed it again. Imani was already on her feet. She walked around the table without a word, opened the front door, and stood beside it. Not ushering with her hands, just standing there, holding it open, waiting. Tasha gathered her bag. She didn't look at Denise. Roland looked at her once, a long, unreadable look that might have been an apology or might have just been regret about the money. Denise couldn't tell, and realized she didn't need to know. They left. The door closed. Denise sat at her table, her white linen, her good plates, the candles burning low now, and for the first time in weeks, she let her shoulders come all the way down. Bishop came back to his seat and lowered himself into it without ceremony. Imani came around and dropped into the chair beside Denise, close enough that their arms touched. Nobody said anything for a moment. They didn't need to. The divorce took 11 weeks. Denise had expected it to feel like a war. It didn't. Roland had come to the table with less than he thought he had, and once he understood that, once his own attorney walked him through what Julian had already filed and finalized, there wasn't much to fight over. The business was Denise's, fully, cleanly, on paper and in practice. The house went to Denise, too, since Roland couldn't demonstrate he'd contributed meaningfully to the mortgage without implicating himself further. He signed where he was told to sign. Julian had been thorough. Denise had sat across from Roland at the mediator's table on the last day of proceedings. He'd worn his good suit, the charcoal one she'd helped him pick out 3 years ago, but it hung a little differently now, like even his posture had changed. He didn't say anything to her outside of what the process required. She didn't say anything extra either. There was nothing left to say. She walked out of that building on a Tuesday afternoon, the sun sharp and warm against her face, and felt the full, clean weight of a door closing behind her. The second location had been Imani's idea first, but Denise had been thinking it for months. A corner space opened up in the East Side commercial strip. Good foot traffic, a kitchen large enough to run full event prep, close enough to their existing accounts that the logistics made sense. Denise and Imani walked through it on the Thursday morning, and by the time they reached the back storage room, they were already dividing up the layout between them. Walk-in goes here, Imani said, tapping the wall. Display counter runs along that window, Denise pointed. Natural Light sells the food before we even open the case. Imani turned and looked at her. We're doing this. We're doing this, Denise said. It wasn't a question from either of them. The opening happened 6 weeks later. Small, intentional, just the people who mattered. Bishop came early, as he always did, and stood near the front window with his coffee, looking around the space with the quiet pride of a man who builds things and knows good construction when he sees it. He didn't say much. He didn't have to. When Denise caught his eye from across the room, he nodded once, slow and certain, and she felt it land somewhere deep in her chest. Imani cried, which she immediately denied. "Allergies," she said, dabbing at her eyes with a cocktail napkin. "Sure," Denise said. Julian came after the small crowd had thinned. He brought good wine and better conversation, and he stayed until the candles on the front counter had burned most of the way down. At one point, Denise looked over at him from across the room. He was talking to Bishop, laughing at something her father had said, completely at ease, and she noticed how little she had to brace herself around him. No monitoring his tone, no adjusting her words to manage his mood. She just existed in the same room as him, and it was easy. She hadn't realized how heavy the other thing had been until she had something to compare it to. 6 months passed the way good months do, full and fast and marked by progress. She was leaving a vendor meeting on a Wednesday afternoon when she saw Roland. He was coming out of a small property management office on Greer Street, not one of the development firms he used to name-drop at dinner parties, but a leasing company, a mid-level one. He was carrying a clipboard and wearing a shirt without a tie, and he looked like a man doing a job rather than a man building an empire. He didn't see her. She kept walking. She didn't feel triumphant. She didn't feel sad. What she felt was something closer to neutral, the quiet of a storm that had passed entirely, leaving the air clean. Whatever Roland was now, it was simply what happened when a man spent years depending on someone else's foundation and then lost access to it. She heard about Tasha separately, the way you hear things in a city where everyone's circles eventually overlap. A mutual acquaintance mentioned it in passing, that Tasha had lost the Linwood property to foreclosure, that she'd had a falling out with most of their shared friend group once the full story got around, that she'd apparently moved to a different part of the city. Nobody said it with much drama. It was just a fact now, filed alongside all the other facts. Denise listened, nodded, and changed the subject. She locked up the Eastside location at 8:15 on a Friday night, the last of the prep staff already gone, the kitchen clean and cold and ready for morning. She stood in the doorway for just a moment, the way she sometimes did at the end of a good day, and looked back at the lit interior through the glass. Her name was on the awning, hers alone. Julian was outside on the sidewalk, hands in his jacket pockets, looking up at the awning himself. He turned when he heard the door. "Good day?" he asked. "Really good day," she said. She locked the door, dropped the keys into her bag, and stood for a moment in the cool evening air, thinking about nothing in particular, and then about everything, all at once. She had not won by being louder than them. She had not won by being angrier or faster or more reckless. She had won by being still while they unraveled, by building quietly while they assumed she was breaking, by knowing exactly what she had, protecting it, and waiting. Her patience hadn't been weakness. It never had been. It had been the whole plan. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. I've got 2 stories on the screen that you have to watch next. Have a great day!